So everyone, welcome to the Green Spotlight. Tonight we're going to discuss the key values number 7, which is feminism and gender equity. The presentation is by Sue Edward, Kelley, Dragoo, and myself, Cris, Mann.
Hang on, it won't let me advance the slide.
Okay. Well, I'll just keep going.
Okay, I guess I got to do it manually. I thought I could just use the down arrow or something, but.
Okay, sorry.
I think it's page down.
Is it page down?
Or a space bar.
And not,
And
yeah.
so
Okay.
what we're doing is discussing feminism within the Green Party platform. Now, at the beginning, we decided on a broad definition of feminism. African-American woman, an author, social activist who's been in the forefront of observing the intersectionality of race, capitalism, and gender. Her name is Bell Hooks. I found this definition that I think fits the Green Party platform. She says feminism is not simply a struggle to end male chauvinism or a movement to ensure that women will have equal rights with men. It's a commitment to eradicating the ideology of domination that permeates Western culture on various levels, sex, race, and class. And she favors an end to what we call imperialism or modern capitalism. Go ahead. Also, another feminist who's active in immigrant rights, Margaret Randall, she echoes Hooks' definition by saying that feminism really requires thinking, rethinking, reorganizing our society. And I feel that the Green Party is about reorganizing society. So let's take a look at the platform that the Green Party has for women's rights. I thought these words were powerful. The change the world is crying for cannot occur unless women's voices are heard. Democracy will not work, it cannot work without equality for women, which provides for equal participation and representation. And this all boils down to laying a legal foundation, which is what the Equal Rights Amendment will do. And it's taking an extraordinarily long 72 years for women to win just the basic right to vote. But the Equal Rights Amendment was introduced in 1923 and still has not been passed. Next slide. What is the Equal Rights Amendment? It basically says the equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Go ahead, next slide. Equality, it just seems like such a simple idea, yet the rulers do not want this law in effect because it would ricochet to equal pay for equal work. But I wanted to zero in here on working women in particular have a proud history of fighting for the ERA. Women since the 30s and before that also have fought for dignity and security, the right to organize unions and better working conditions and wages, as well as an end to discrimination on the job. Working women have fought and died for a better wages and living conditions. An example of that right now is the Amazon Union Drive in Alabama. And I want to show, if I can, this is a pamphlet that I used when I was on coalitions for the Equal Rights Amendment, but it's labor's case for the ERA. It shows that working women and men have fought for this. Okay, next slide. Okay, another part of the Green Party platform, which Sue is going to speak about next, is the woman's right to control her own body. And the Green Party says this right is non-negotiable. It is essential that the option of safe legal abortion remains available, and it's quickly diminishing. Next slide. The Green Party supports other reforms to end poverty and return dignity to all mothers, such things as a universal basic income for men and for women who are raising children, because the nurturing of the next generation is very important. Next slide. This is something I found very true, is the Green Party urges that the term domestic violence be replaced by the term violence, because domestic violence is not perceived as really violent. Next slide. The Green Party calls for a safer world for women and girls. The term sex work is not to be used in relationship to prostitution. The Green Party has zero tolerance for illegal international traffic of human beings, be they women or children. Next slide. The Green Party affirms the rights of all individuals to freely choose intimate partners, regardless of sex, gender, or gender identity. And we also recognize the full civil rights of sexual and gender minorities. Next slide. We also support closing the wage gap of women workers and men's wages. And this supports many of these Paycheck Fairness Acts and similar, although if the ERA was passed, that would automatically make equal work for equal pay legal. Next slide. And it's interesting, the Green Party also calls for equal representation of women in Congress. Women comprise 51% of the population, I believe. We're 50% of the workforce. And as of 2012, it was 17% representation in Congress. It's more than that now, but I don't know what it is. We support the inclusion of an equal number of women and men in peace talks and negotiations, because think about it, war affects women and children because women and children get bombed. And the thinking is that more women would sort of try to turn that around. And we support the prosecution of sexual harassment complaints through the Equal Opportunities Commission. Okay, next slide. And now Sue will take it over with reproductive rights.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just kind of zero in on this topic a little bit. So reproductive rights is defined as having the ability to decide whether and when to have children. So what does this mean as a Green? Well, reproductive rights is enabling women to make informed decisions. And that means access to sex education. And if you look at these statistics, it's appalling. Only 15 states require that sex education be medically accurate. 37 states have laws requiring abstinence be included in the curriculum. Oklahoma not only dictates to the sex education curriculum, but also its state's health department that they must state that clearly and consistently teach that abortion kills a living human being. And Louisiana and Tennessee prohibit organizations who provide abortions from providing sex ed in schools, which means they can invite a church group in to talk about abstinence, but they can't invite Planned Parenthood in to talk about like birth control and STDs or anything like that. Reproductive rights is providing resources to women who decide not to have a child. And the best way to do that is access to birth control. And 19 million women live in a contraceptive desert. You've heard of food deserts. Well, this is a lack of access to a clinic. There's also pharmacist refusal laws. If you have a prescription for birth control, the pharmacist can refuse with absolutely no repercussions. You can just refuse to fill it. And access to abortion care, and these numbers are a little old. I'm sure it's worse now, but in 2008, 851 clinics were available across the US, and in 2014, it was a 7% decrease to 788. And 5 states only have 1 clinic. And access to sterilization, especially for younger women who know that that's what they want, they can be refused. There are questions saying, well, what if you change your mind? Or, you know, what if you meet a man who wants children? As if her decision is not important. Reproductive rights is also providing resources to women who decide to have a child, which means they need access to prenatal care. 1 in 16 infants was born to a woman with no prenatal care, and 1 in 7 to women without adequate prenatal care. Also means we provide support systems to those women so they can raise the child once the child is born. That means access to parenting classes, maternity leave. How much maternity leave do you think is guaranteed to women in the US? If you said anything higher than 0, you're wrong. In Bulgaria, you get 58.6 weeks. I don't know where the 0.6 comes in, but 58.6 weeks at 90% of your pay. And in Croatia, you get 30 weeks at 100% pay. And in the US, you hear, oh, women get 6 weeks, but that's not required. It's traditional, but it's not guaranteed. You don't get paid. If you want money, you have to use your vacation time that you've accrued or go on short-term disability, or you go unpaid under the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA. The other thing that would help a woman is a living wage and universal basic income, access to programs which are totally getting been cut in recent years, such as SNAP and WIC, school lunch programs, and also access to childcare, whether it's employer provided or something in the community, but it has to be convenient to the woman and reliable. Reproductive rights is respecting women for making what is a very personal decision. So stop harassing women. The worst offenders in my mind, and I'll talk more about this later, are the protesters at women's clinics. But also belittling women who choose not to have children in the first place. You know, don't go up to someone and say, oh, well, you know, when are you going to have kids? You better, you know, you'll change your mind in a few years, or who's going to take care of you when you get old? Give women credit for knowing what, you know, what they know. And then the legislative war on women. These laws keep getting worse and worse. They are intentionally designed to get challenged in the courts because their goal is to have it overturned at a lower court so they can appeal to a higher court and keep appealing till they get to the Supreme Court. Their goal is to overturn Roe v. Wade. And just a few examples of these are enforced waiting periods, which means a woman has to go to a clinic, get some kind of biased counseling, and then come back 24 or 48 hours later for the procedure. It means she has to take 2 days off of work. She needs 2 days of childcare if she has children already. You know, if it's a long distance, she has to travel and there might not be public transportation. There's ultrasound laws, which if you're not very far along, they're very invasive. You have to do it vaginally. Fetal heartbeat laws, the heart isn't even developed, but they're saying at 6 weeks, you can't have an abortion. You know, biological father's consent, parental consent for teenagers, all of these are purposely making it harder for women. And then I'm going to pass it on now to Kelley.
All right, I wanted to make sure that we were keeping an intersectional focus on this beautiful Women's History Month conversation, because it's important to recognize that not all women experience womanhood in the same way. Black women, brown women, women who are impoverished, working women, trans women, lesbian women, bisexual women, we all experience womanhood and our experiences of womanhood very differently. So I wanted to make sure that we were talking about this. So we're going to go to the next slide and we're going to talk about, I'm going to just bring some of this stuff to your attention. So one of my favorite things is this Sojourner Truth's Ain't I a Woman speech, which was delivered at the Ohio Women's Rights Convention in 1851. She's making the comments, I'm not going to sit here and read all of this, but she's making these comments about how different her experiences of being a woman are from these white women who are wanting rights. She says that this man says that a woman needs to be helped out of carriage and lifted over puddles. And she's like, nobody ever lifted me over mud puddles. I've been plowing and planting, and no man could best her. She talks about how she has 13 kids and most of them have been sold off into slavery. And when she cried out, nobody helped her, and how different that experience is from white women's experiences. You know, she even though slavery doesn't exist in the same way, the ramifications of slavery in modern society have made Black women's experiences and white women's experiences very, very different. So I want to make sure that we're focusing on understanding that just because I, as a white woman, know what feminism means to me, that feminism can be a very different thing to a Black woman. I also want to bring up some things that are kind of happening in, you know, the fourth wave intersectional feminism. There are some people who are what is called a SWERF, which is a sex worker, exclusionary radical feminist, which means that you support all women, but not sex workers. Now, I know that we had mentioned sex work a little bit earlier in the Green Party. This is not in opposition to that understanding within our own platform. This is about understanding that whatever brought them to that point, they need to be protected for the work that they're doing and valued for the work that they're doing. Because everybody wants sex workers, but they don't want to value those individuals as humans. Another thing is the rise of what is known as like gender critical ideology, or TERFs, which is trans exclusionary radical feminists. So we support all quote unquote biological women, completely ignoring the fact that biology does not separate us into a binary. Give that a quick Google and learn something. The point of feminism and the point of the Green Party is to create radical change. And radical change demands radical acceptance. And the first step to acceptance is understanding that you don't know. I put on here, I don't know that experience, but I understand that I don't know. And so kind of leaning into the unknown and really doing the work to educate yourself on an experience that you don't have any understanding of is what we need to be a good ally to women. And that is my intersectionality bit. And we're going to move forward into something else. I'm not sure who's talking about this.
These are just comments I had on characteristics of intersectionality that, just like Kelley said, is the community is built by working through differences, not sweeping them under the rug. And I had an experience of working in a coalition in Louisville, Kentucky, and I call it my heart-thumping experience because for this coalition to build the Equal Rights Amendment, we had gay men, union women, Black rights organizations, all in one working coalition. And the culmination point of it was when the Stearns wives of the coal miners who were on strike came to our conference, and the whole conference stood up and gave them an ovation because they did things like lay in front of the coal bosses' equipment to help their husbands in a strike. And it's like people change when you work in a genuine coalition and recognize each other's sameness and recognize each other's differences too. Okay, next. Sorry.
Oh, did we have this one twice? Okay. I think we had one slide twice.
Okay, so now we're just going to touch on a view that you can, a structure that you can use to analyze male privilege. Okay, So male privilege and patriarchy is defined by three things, okay? So it is male-centered, male-identified, and male-dominated. Now, we're going to talk about specifically male privilege, but you can use this for all kinds of privilege: heterosexual privilege, white privilege, you know, upper-class privilege, whatever you want. It's very usable. So male-centered, the focus of the culture is on male people, their accomplishments, and their lives. And this is seen kind of everywhere. Anytime you are watching a movie, anytime you turn on the TV, anytime you read a book, 7 times out of 10, that main character is going to be a male. Okay. The next thing is that it's male identified, which is about, it's a little bit less in your face, but it's nonetheless extremely important. It's about how, like, male associated character traits and activities are more highly valued in a, or
I think we lost
in a patriarchal society, whereas female associated traits are devalued, insult that can be hurled at a boy or a man, or Nancy or Sally, when a football coach wants to them girls. The last thing is that it's male dominated. This means it's pretty straightforward. This means that in a large part, the men are the drivers of society. It means that they get to take on the most powerful roles. Men get to be presidents and CEOs, and women get to be teachers and nurses. And we all know how education and healthcare are systematically devalued and defunded right now. So it's just a good way to kind of analyze where your privilege is lying. There it is.
Okay, and our last slide deals with Sue and my different experiences. I have had the opportunity, and I'm so glad I had this, to work in factories, non-traditional work experiences. And my friend Josephine in Louisville, she put a suit against Bell Telephone Company because they wouldn't let her advance to a better job, and she lost her life savings doing that. I had a short-term work experience at Ford in Louisville where we were hired for summer jobs, and we had 3 days to learn a job, and then most of the women that were hired were fired after the 3rd day, but the key is you can't learn some of the jobs in 3 days, and the union got our jobs back. I worked in a CO2 weld booth, and every man in the booth, here's the picture, can we see that? This is me suited up to work on the car in the weld booth, and every single man in the booth told me that I would fail at the job, but I had the person that trained me, he came early and stayed late and made sure I made it through the probation. And he was a member of the Black Panther Party also. And he understood the situation. And then at a rubber plant in Louisville, Kentucky, African-American woman reported for the first day of her job, and all of the men, except for a few, and it was led by the company because company assigns jobs, they took bets, they were gonna put her on a jackhammer job, jackhammering cement, and they all bet that she would leave before noon. But someone tipped her off to that, and they told her, and she said she hung on to that jackhammer for her dear life, and you know, she made it through her probation and stuff. But they try to show that women don't have the same capacity in some of the non-traditional jobs. Okay, Sue.
All right, well, when I lived in Charleston before moving here, I volunteered at the Charleston Women's Medical Center, which was a women's clinic. They did abortions on Saturday mornings. I got my butt over there at 6:30 a.m. every single Saturday for 11 and a half years. It's that important to me. But the thing that really got me there was the protesters. And the vast majority of them were old white men. And after that, old white women. And they had absolutely no respect for the women who were going there and making that decision, that difficult decision, and just screaming horrific things at them. Mommy, mommy, don't kill your baby. And, you know, and like trying to imitate a child's voice. They had posters with really upsetting graphics on them. You know, don't kill your baby. And they would just basically harass the women who would show up there. And some of the women confided in me. I was an escort. Basically, I'd meet them at their car and walk them to the door. And, you know, they'd say, I already have kids and I can't, you know, afford to have another child because I'm struggling as it is and balancing my jobs. You know, if these people had any kind of compassion or respected the women for making this terrible, you know, difficult decision, or, you know, maybe they, instead of voting for politicians who are going to cut any kind of Head Start or funding or not giving, you know, accurate sex education, it would actually reduce the demand for abortion. So there's just so much hypocrisy, and I could talk all day, but I won't.